in this video, we're continuing on with chapter 14 and moving on to schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a disorder that's characterized by a deteriorating ability to function in everyday life. And so one of the caveats to schizophrenia is it typically doesn't have an onset until late teens or early 20s. Often people are described as developing completely normally, and then something goes awry in the brain and causes this deterioration of functioning in life. And this has to occur for at least a 6-month period. Now there's another video that's going to go through and really talk about the symptoms, but I just want to lay them out for you here as well. So in order to be diagnosed with schizophrenia, you must have had at least 2 of the following, again, for a 6-month period, and there has to be some sort of social or occupational disturbance that occurs. That's the important thing to understand with mental disorders, that they have to disrupt your daily functioning in some way. Hallucinations, this could be a visual hallucination, but it could also be an auditory hallucination. So I had a family friend who was diagnosed with schizophrenia late in life, and one of her visual hallucinations was that she said that she saw somebody in her neighborhood building a wall every day, and then they would tear it down at night. Delusions or unjustifiable beliefs. So this family friend, she also had this belief that her husband was cooking drugs. Now you might think, well, maybe he was, a drug trafficker or something like that. But this wasn't just that he was, and the word cooking drugs was her language as well. It wasn't just that he was cooking drugs. It was that this was happening while he was making dinner. So that in their kitchen, while he was making dinner for the family, he was also somehow cooking drugs. So that's, just an unjustifiable belief. And it also spiraled from there. So it went from her husband making drugs to getting his daughter involved and her boyfriend involved, and they were doing drug signs on a cable car in San Francisco, and that the people who were building the wall that she saw were living in their attic and were watching her when she took showers. And so it continued to expand and grow over time. Disorganized speech. So often their speech doesn't make sense. They jump from maybe topic to topic. It could be the thoughts in their head are racing too much, or they're just not connected in the proper way. Grossly disorganized behavior. So this family friend, one of the things that she did was her husband was gone one weekend, and she walked around with a backpack on all weekend, pacing around her living room floor. And the girls kept asking her, she had 2 teenage daughters, kept asking her what she was doing, why she was doing that, and she just would mumble things that they couldn't, again, kind of that disorganized speech that they couldn't quite understand. And then weak or absent signs of emotion, speech, and socialization. So she went from being a very friendly, kind of outgoing woman to one time we saw her before she got diagnosed, she just kind of sat there and just didn't really want to interact with anybody. Also, once she got diagnosed, we were with her on New Year's Eve, and it was just interesting to, and sad to watch that the only time that she would speak to you is if she was spoken to. And then it was just real yes, no answers. Her face, where she had, she didn't seem to show any emotional response to the children and things like that. So just another example. So we can break these symptoms down into positive symptoms and negative symptoms. So the positive symptoms are behaviors that are present that should be absent. So those hallucinations that we described. And I have another video that you'll watch that kind of shows you what these hallucinations might really look like to someone with schizophrenia. Delusions, the disorganized speech, and the disorganized behavior. Those are all things that are there in someone that has schizophrenia that shouldn't be there. Then we have negative symptoms. So these negative symptoms are behaviors that are absent that should be present. So if you think back to that list of symptoms, it's that weak or absent emotion, speech, or socialization. The negative symptoms are a little bit harder to treat, and they're typically stable over time. And you think about it's like emotional flatness, an inability to follow through with activities or experience pleasure. And so that's just kind of harder to treat, at least with your typical antipsychotics. Then we also have cognitive symptoms, which is this limitation of thought and reasoning. So people who were once sometimes very intelligent and spoke very eloquently, so they have this limitation of thought and reasoning when they're going through these schizophrenic episodes. Most common is difficulty using and understanding abstract concepts. And these can be one of the things that makes it very difficult for schizophrenic to function in society. So the main problem for schizophrenics is an abnormal interaction between the cortex, the thalamus, and the cerebellum. And it once was thought that we were, looking at certain brain regions to see if it was smaller or larger, or there was damage to it. But we really seem to understand, especially with schizophrenia, that seems to be the connectivity in the brain. And so that it's the connectivity between the cortex and the thalamus and the cerebellum is off, and it leads to this disordered thinking, which causes these hallucinations and other symptoms.